as long as there has been a discipline of psychiatry, which isn't that long really, we have always seen, and we still do see, the mental health conditions in terms of a malfunctioning machine. A machine that needs to be fixed if it can be fixed, and maybe it can't. So it's worth just making the point, even though it's been said lots and lots of times before, that we live in the machine age. Our way of looking at the world was changed dramatically by the whole-scale production of machines and machine-type processes, which started, of course, in the Industrial Revolution. It affected our consciousness so much that, as has often been said, we see everything in terms of machines. That's our metaphor par excellence, which is good for some things. It's good for it's good for the kind of practical side of things, but it's not a universal metaphor for everything, even though we unconsciously imagine that it is. Some people might say, oh yes, but we're way beyond that now. We're not in the industrial age, we're in the information age or whatever. But that's a machine too. Computing systems are machines. They're just machines you can't see. They don't have big pistons, and they don't have cogwheels, and they don't have stuff that you can see, like a steam engine or like something like that. You know, this is a machine because it's like so obvious. We live in a machine age. It's just that the machines are growing more subtle and we don't see them. Still all machines though. The whole structure and function of society, our organization as human beings, is machine-like, entirely machine-like. And it's getting more machine-like the whole time. It's getting better at connecting with itself. It's getting better at globalizing. Getting more efficient. The machine's getting more efficient. And it's very obvious once we start looking at it. It's very obvious, but we don't necessarily see that there's anything wrong with that, because we see it as being progress and kind of exciting and stuff, and we all want to help that process on its way. So it's no surprise that we see the mental health conditions in terms of a malfunctioning machine. The brain is a machine and it's malfunctioning. Recently, however, there have been the dawnings of a new way of looking at things. There has been a tendency to look at the bigger picture and say, well, maybe it's something in society or the way society is organized. Maybe the problem is outside of us instead of inside of us. And this makes sense, because if we look at the increase of anxiety and depression, it's increasing like anything. And recently in the COVID times, we've seen OCD and anorexia and anxiety really spike in teenagers. Now, all of that is not due to a brain malfunction. We know that. It's obviously not. So we really do have to let go of that. It has been said that maybe the problem is not so much a malfunctioning brain, but that we're not getting what we really need in order to be truly human. And the man who wrote Lost Connections says that. I can't remember his name. We're just not getting the real, genuine, authentic human connections anymore, and as a result, we're much more likely to get depressed or develop addictions. So this is a very fruitful way of looking at things. Naturally, the mental health industries have no interest at all in this, and all the professions involved have very little interest, because they don't. because of vested interests. There's a whole way of life involved in treating mental illness, or what used to be called mental illness, now mental health conditions. We're trying to get more politically correct about how we talk about it, but we still see it in this mechanistic way. There's a lot of talk about other possible ways of looking at it, because people are always free to talk, and anybody can write a book or give a talk or go on, make their own YouTube channel and talk about things, but that doesn't influence the core professionals. The power of vested interest is immense. It's impossible to overstate how great it is. It's impossible to imagine how great it is, really. It overrules everything. One of the original pioneer quantum physicists made the statement that science does not progress experiment by experiment or insight by insight or discovery by discovery, that it progresses funeral by funeral, because that's the only way the old fellows are going to let go of their grip, because their identity, their everything, their identity is tied up with this old way of seeing things, and the identity is the sacred thing. It's the thing we don't want to let go of, no matter what. The identity, our identity, is more important than the truth, essentially, and that goes across the board, not just in this particular case that we're talking about here. Having the identity that we're invested in is always more important than the truth. Of course it is, because if the truth comes along, that's the end of that identity, inevitably, invariably. So of course the identity is where our number one allegiance is to, which is shooting ourselves in the foot, because this identity that we're propping up and holding on to brings nothing but pain. It is a machine. We're right in using the machine metaphor there. The identity is a machine that produces nothing but suffering, ever, ever, ever. Its trick is that it produces delayed suffering, so we kind of can fool ourselves that we've got rid of the suffering, but we've delayed it. And the better the machine, the longer it delays it for, but it only does delay it. So that's why the defined identity isn't so great. And that's why the defined identity does start to crack up sooner or later and lose its integrity as an actual thing, and become a burden to us instead. Even then we don't let go of it, we try to get it fixed. So going back to the new way of looking at the mental health conditions, we can agree with that and say, well, okay, maybe the mental health conditions are due to us not getting what we need as human beings, genuine human beings, not what we have been turned into, which is kind of narcissistic social units designed to shop and ignore the bigger picture. That's what we're designed to do, and we've fallen in with that plan pretty much. And surprise, surprise, that isn't particularly healthy for us. It's healthy for the economy, and the economy is what matters, so it doesn't really matter about us. And okay, that might sound like I'm just being sarcastic in a cheap way, but that is exactly the logic. There is no other logic. That is the logic that's being used here. There's no way to avoid that. That is the logic. The economy is more important than the mental health of the individual. So if we go along with that, we can take it a little bit further and say that what the very root cause of the chronic patterns of mental suffering that we can't seem to free ourselves from, and which we get stuck in and keep on perpetuating, the mental health conditions, is due to loss of autonomy. That is the root, the loss of autonomy. And this ties in with Ivan Illich's definition, or maybe one of his definitions of not mental health. Health is where we autonomously deal with our own life, even if we're dying, even if we're really sick. If we're dealing with it autonomously, not letting someone else take over for us, then we're healthy. Healthy doesn't mean never getting sick. Healthy doesn't mean never dying. If we never got sick and never died, that'd probably be pretty unhealthy, I'd say. So mental health is consciously living life from our own understanding, or from our own basis of what life means, not letting someone else tell us how to live life or what life is. And even in that kind of simple definition, we can see that we've all been very compromised, because every last one of us has been told what life is, and we don't see that as being mentally unhealthy. We may not even see that we've been told what life is. But of course society tells us what life is. Our only understanding of what life is given to us by society. We get punished so much if we venture one way or the other, if we try and question it, that we very quickly learn, and then forget that we've learned, never to challenge what society tells us we should think. That's called socialization. We're all socialized. It's such a titanic effort to get away from being desocialized that if you ever had to break free of it and become an individual again, you'd know about it, because you don't embark upon a titanic struggle like that and forget about it. It's the defining thing of your life. So there's a tendency for us to, by default, think, yes, I'm an autonomous individual. But unless there was a titanic struggle there, no, you're not. Obviously, you're not. That's just a convenient, nice little illusion that society throws our way, and we're happy enough to go along with that illusion, of course. We're only human after all. So that's one side of being human, is just taking the easy way out and not looking at the bigger picture if the bigger picture spells an awful lot of work. But the other side of being human is that our autonomy has this power in it, that it does want to assert itself, and it does want to see the truth. So the other side of being human is that we do want to see the truth, even if it is injurious to our illusions, injurious to our illusion-based identity. There's something in us wants to see the truth, because the truth is more important. It's more important because seeing the truth brings peace. It brings us back to being who we truly are, and reconnects us with the world. Illusions, naturally enough, don't do that, and illusions don't bring any sort of peace. But the ongoing warfare of trying to prop up the illusion the whole time, as long as you possibly can. So another way of looking at this, and it's just shifting very slightly, just to put a very slightly different perspective on it, just to avoid getting stuck in any one formula, is to say that anything that takes away our autonomy is the predator, in inverted commas. And the predator is a metaphor. It's a very, very useful metaphor. It doesn't mean that there is a predator there, like in the film The Predator, that is stealing our autonomy. Whatever takes our autonomy from us is the predator. If we have an idea about who we are, if we're got our idea that I am this identity, then that's my loss of autonomy, because instead of being true to who I really am, or instead of relating to the truth of the situation, everything's filtered through the illusion of this identity. So I have to serve the identity. It's my master. My identity isn't who I am, it's something else, but I've pledged my allegiance to it. Therefore, this identity is the root cause of my loss of autonomy. It's the identity that's got the autonomy. Only an identity can't have autonomy, because it's not a real thing, it's a fiction. So it doesn't really have autonomy, but it sure as hell I've given my autonomy to it. And then it's just trashed it. It's just, what does the defined identity do with our autonomy? just pisses it away. It annihilates it. It has the job of annihilating our autonomy. So this gives us a way of looking at what the predator is. And so then we can look at all the things in life that are taking our autonomy away. And there we see the activity of the predator. So all the beliefs that we have, that's the activity of the predator. All the concrete concepts or thoughts we have about the world and ourselves, that's the predator. Because all of these take away our autonomy. They take away our autonomy because there's only one way for autonomy to happen, and that is through having an unwavering relationship, or at least a relationship which isn't snuffed out and forgotten about for the rest of our lives, or a large portion of our lives, with the truth. That's autonomy. So autonomy comes from the individual having a connection with what we can call the truth, even though people will tell you this is a truth and that isn't the truth, and here's a truth and you have to believe that isn't the truth. As Krishnamurti says, someone else's truth is not the truth. It's just the predator. That's how the predator comes across, as this is the truth. One's own truth really means perceiving things with authenticity for oneself and not accepting what has been given to us by our culture or our religion or whatever the hell, our nationality or whatever tribe we belong to. We don't get our perception of truth or who we are and what life is about from an outside source. We can't sort it out that way. Well, we can, but if we do, we lose our autonomy. And that's fine if we accept that I'm going to lose my identity, lose my autonomy, sorry. Okay, I'm free to do that if I want to. But the thing is that we can't do that without putting ourselves in line for a huge amount of suffering, the suffering that comes from loss of autonomy. And then through this suffering, eventually we can come back to autonomy, because it's the only way to come back to autonomy, is through then relating to the pain and suffering that's caused by our loss of autonomy. But as usual, and I'm aware that I keep on making this point, when we do become mentally unwell, as it's called, even though I wouldn't say that's the case, because actually it's a manifestation of the truth, that it happens to be painful, because truth very often is painful. Or at least we could say it's painful at first when we're in opposition to it, but when our resistance to the truth breaks down, then it isn't painful, because the only pain comes from our resistance to the way things actually are, and our great attachment to the way things we think they should be, or the way we're told more likely that they should be. So the external authority, which is society, or which is the group we're part of, tells us what life's all about, and that's the loss of our autonomy. And so does our own thinking, is another external authority, because our own thinking is no different to the external authority of our group. They put it there, and it comes from the outside. It's not us. Our own thinking is not us. It's the foreign installation, as Carlos Castaneda says. So whether it's our thinking or whether it's the direct influences of society or the group we're in, all of that stuff takes away our autonomy. And at this present point in human history, we can see that the giving away of autonomy, giving away of our autonomy, the enthusiastic giving away of our autonomy has reached epidemic proportions. We're so keen to be told what to do about this and what to do about that, that when it comes to something which isn't just a minor upset, but when it comes to something which is one of the major mental health conditions, we're very, very keen to be told by the external authority what this is, what causes it, i.e. the machine's going wrong, your brain's malfunctioning, whatever they want to tell us, and turn it over to experts, which again is a absolutely profound loss of autonomy. So the suffering we're going through is root causes loss of autonomy. And we want to give away our autonomy even more because we're frightened. We can't be blamed for that. And we don't have any trust in ourselves. And we can't be blamed for that. Well, we could in a way because we've given away our autonomy, but we don't really know that we're doing it. It just happens as a process. We're not consciously aware that we're giving away our autonomy. But because we do, we end up in this situation. And then because we're frightened, because we don't trust ourselves, we give away our autonomy even more to the mental health professionals who will tell us what's going wrong with us, what's going up with us, what's happening with us, and they will tell us what we should do, all of which comes down to taking away our autonomy. There's no way to argue that. Of course it comes down to taking away our autonomy. And our autonomy is our mental health. There's absolutely no way to get mental health from listening to what other people tell us. Even if they happen to be extremely wise people, they're still not going to tell us because they'd be wise enough not to do that. They wouldn't pass on their views onto us because they happen to be wise, even though we might be very keen, because if I met someone who's very, very wise and I kind of know that they are and I need help, I'm going to be so keen to listen to them and let them tell me. But if that person is wise, and that may or may not be the case, but if they are wise, they aren't going to tell me. I have to learn that for myself. We can support other people in that journey, but we can't do it for them, which sounds like a terrible cliche, but it's true. And it really is the case that at this particular point, we seem to be so fantastically dedicated to handing away all of our autonomy. It's kind of the thing to do. There was a thing which I saw yesterday. It was a kind of one of these things that comes up on YouTube or somewhere like that. And it was kind of one of these things that say, do this thing if you burn your mouth. And and there's a picture of a woman and she's eating a burger. She was a little bit hasty. She bit into it too soon. She burnt her mouth. Do this thing if you burn your mouth. And that sounds really stupid, but it's totally normal because the internet is full of these things saying, do this thing if, do this thing if. Little kind of hacks, little kind of life hacks. And we're desperate for them, because if we weren't, we wouldn't be clicking them. If we weren't clicking them, they wouldn't be existing there. We bring them into existence with our attention, the same as thoughts, exactly the same as thoughts. So if all this ludicrous shite is there on the internet, it's because we manifested it. To use that somewhat dubious word, we brought it about. It's a reflection of what we want. So all of this stuff, do this if, do that off, here's some guy that knows all about this, or here's some guy going to tell us how to lose body fat, do this, do that. All of that stuff is the predator. And really, it has to be said that the predator has never had it so good. He really, really has never had it so good. The predator is having a field day. Okay, thanks for watching.